Good evening and welcome to Más con Más. I am your host, Raul Mas, here accompanied by my co-host, Andres Albuquerque. Thank you for being with us here again. We are broadcasting from the studios of ENTV USA and this magnificent facility called Cachita Universal Studios. We want to thank our sponsors, Longevity, Café Cachita, Grimal Joyeria, and also the Porto Alegre Brazilian restaurant. That's my favorite food. Is
Picanha,
the Brazilian food with a little bit of
Rodicio.
and the caipirinhas and all that good stuff.
That's important.
They're the ones that make this program possible. We always like to give them a shout out at the beginning of the program. Thank you for being here with us this evening. A lot of news this week, Andres. More of the same stuff.
Yeah.
Once again, we continue to see the riots taking place throughout America, although a lot of it has calmed down. You know, we're still seeing some disturbances. But perhaps the most shocking thing is what we've seen in Seattle, where there is now apparently a small part of the city that has been, quote unquote, liberated from the police and from the powers that be.
I saw the surrender of the prison in Minneapolis, and I thought I had seen it all. First thing that came to mind was our embassy in Vietnam when we left in a rush, in a hurry, as we usually do. We have everything worked out and planned out, but for some reason, we always leave in an next stampede. Then, back again, fast forward, 1979, our embassy in Tehran, Iran. Another disaster. People just overtaking and overwhelming our people. And now I see these demonstrators that are nothing to do with spontaneous and genuine demonstrations. And they took the prison in Minneapolis, and now they took another police station or prison in Seattle. And like you say, there's like a Soviet in Seattle now, because that's the word.
What's surprising about this is the Seattle police chief has come out very publicly and said, listen, you know, we were fighting to protect that precinct, you know, to keep control of the neighborhood, but we got no support from the mayor. The mayor basically told us to, abandon our efforts. So, you know, what's disturbing about this is if you think about the model of policing in America is not a federal obligation by and large. I mean, we have the FBI, we have, marshals, we have a Secret Service, we have a certain, level of federal police, but very small in size when compared to, the number of municipal police departments, county police departments, state police departments that we have throughout the country. And in America, policing is primarily a local function.
But I got good news for you.
What's that?
There is something in our Constitution that is called the city charter. So for the city charter, which is like the Carta Magna of the city or the town or whatever incorporation is the name. So the city charter states that it is the right, the privilege of the city council to protect the city, but it's also a duty. Correct. So if a city fails to have law enforcement, the federal government, the governor of the state has the power to overtake.
Right. So you're talking about the Florida Constitution, and you're absolutely right.
And the cities in America in general.
Cities in America basically are allowed to be cities in America because the state governments grant them that authority.
Yeah.
And like a lot of things in America, the federal law comes first, state law comes second, and then and only then do you have municipal laws, coming into effect and regulations and whatnot.
That's right.
There are many times when municipalities try and overstep their boundaries and get into matters that really are state matters.
And they got a slap in the
wrist. And I
wrist.
think what you're referring to here is that these municipalities that are not, keeping their word to protect their citizens may, in fact, theoretically, they could be dissolved by the state.
They breaking the law.
I don't see that happening, though, in Seattle, because Seattle has both a Democratic mayor and they've got a Democratic governor. And these guys are not going to get into a fighting match with each other.
Unless they're pressed to do it because of elections or whatever.
Well, whatever. But I think the big fear in this, quite frankly, is, if you have basically municipal governments saying, we're walking away from this, or we're not going to enforce the laws for whatever reason, okay? And you've got a governor that basically is not willing to step in and provide state police or the National Guard or whatever, then what comes next? I mean, I don't think anybody wants to see federal troops marching into your local community, your local city, your local county. To a certain extent, that is what Donald Trump has been sort of threatening about. But listen, they're bringing it upon themselves. I mean, you either enforce the laws or you get out of the way and you let somebody do that dirty work that needs to be done.
They want the government to do that. I mean, if that happens, they could have grounds to postpone the election, said the election is not legal because it's forced. I mean, it's rhetoric, Raul. It's just rhetoric. They want to dismember this country.
I hope that's not the case. I hope that common sense comes into play here.
The common what? Because lately is a rare commodity, my friend.
Rare commodity. Well, listen, as part of all this effort, the other thing that you've been seeing a lot of is this incredible sort of vilification of the police, right? I mean, you saw the PBA union head in New York come out and basically saying, "Hey, listen, man, we're not animals.
Yeah,
we've got rights too.
He was indignant.
And we don't like being treated as if we're the problem and not the solution. We're the ones that are out there on the streets doing the difficult work of keeping communities safe, and we're entitled to a certain amount of respect." I think the guy is absolutely right. We cannot be making enemies of law enforcement. Law enforcement is a local function. They are part of our community, and we cannot become at odds with each other. And on top of that, at odds with our people that are basically, there to protect us. I mean, they come from our community. They're the people that are basically coaching our kids in little leagues, or the people that we run into in the supermarkets. They live amongst us, man.
I'm basically to do the job.
Right. This is not some sort of foreign occupying force.
Sure.
Okay. These are people that live amongst us, and we need to respect law enforcement in America. This talk about defunding the police, closing the police, having social workers being sent to the site of a domestic violence dispute.
That'll be the day.
Are you kidding me?
I'm telling you.
Are you kidding me to have some nerd showing up on your door at midnight knocking with a clipboard in hand
I'm getting shot
to basically issue a citation or ask if you'd like a ride down to
or if you need a pillow
or an office if you want to go to his soft space to discuss the fact that you're beating up on somebody's, on your wife or something. That's insanity, man. I mean, who the hell's really believing this stuff?
No,
okay?
They don't believe it.
And you know what I think, man? I think a lot of this is about money.
Yep.
Because I'm seeing all these race-baiting profiteers like Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, all of them showed up at the funeral for George Floyd.
Capitalizing on it.
And these guys, you know what it's about? It's another shakedown of corporate America, man. Give us a few $1 million, pour it into the Al Sharpton Charitable Foundation.
Otherwise.
And we'll make sure that all these, racial problems get tamped down, okay, until the next time that we need some more money. I hate to say it, brother, but I think that's a lot of what you're seeing. Follow the money. Follow the money. People don't want to hear it. Listen, nobody is denying that George Floyd was murdered. Nobody is denying that we've got serious problems in this country that still need to be addressed.
Sure.
Okay? But don't fool yourself. There's a lot more going on in these protests than, racial equality. And I see that, in this video that I posted very publicly, a video taken back in 2015. You can look it up for yourself. It's an organization called democracynow.org. And in there, you can see the founder of Black Lives Matter, a woman by the name of Opal Tometi, okay, basically hosted Venezuelan strongman Nicolás Maduro in 2015, and they were having a little, love fest with each other.
A kumbaya moment.
A little kumbaya moment as Nicolás Maduro was enjoying, was speaking to these black revolutionaries and socialists and everybody else in Harlem. There is a lot more going on behind the scenes. This is not just about racial equality. This is not just about, a bad cop who killed somebody. There are some interests behind this. and a lot of them, quite frankly, are coming from the left. They are extremist groups. They are the Antifas of the world. We had this little sort of thing out there, white separatists that they want to sort of throw into the mix. I would venture to say that those white separatists probably pale in comparison
Sure.
to the number of socialists, the number of leftists, the numbers of extremists,
Cuban agents, Venezuelan agents.
Venezuelan agents that are there delivering those pallets of bricks, wanting to cause trouble, wanting to burn down stores, paying off people to throw those rocks and those create that havoc on our streets.
Before we end, I want to say something. They say that this is a black protest for genuine reasons, and we agree that the reasons are genuine. But this is not a black protest, because a black protest would never burn black buildings, black businesses, and hurt poor black people, number one. And number two, this is an attempt on our democracy, on dismembering the West and America, protagonized by very white interest with very green money.
I don't know, Andres, if I completely agree with you on that, man. Because when I look at those videos, okay, and I'm seeing the Target being looted and the Walmart being looted, okay,
Businesses.
9 out of the 10 people that are coming out of that building are black. There might be one guy, white guy, one Hispanic guy.
I have news for you. The ones that have shot police and stuff, they're white.
Well, maybe
They're
that's
white.
the case. Listen, hopefully we have all these investigations coming out and figuring out what the hell's going on here. But I think you and I are in agreement that there's a lot more going on behind the scenes here.
And a lot of foreign interests, and this hand is working very hard.
Right, and blacks clamoring for racial equality.
Okay.
A lot of financial news this week. We've seen a real roller coaster in the financial markets.
That's the word.
We had yesterday, Thursday, an enormous sort of,
Sellout.
pullback, sell-off, if you will. Market was down about 1,800 points. Didn't get a chance to see where it closed today, but late this afternoon, it had started the day today, Friday, up around 700, 800 points, came down around noontime, came back up again, and right now we're still in positive territory, or in the afternoon.
Yeah, the last time we checked.
Around 250 points up.
Yeah, sure.
Hopefully, we'll end up the day in somewhat positive territory if that's the case.
But look at it this way.
A lot of volatility.
But look at it this way. A pandemic, a lot of riots, and the economy refuses to collapse.
Listen.
I mean, let's not see the glass half empty.
Yeah,
let's see it half full. Because this economy is so strong fundamentally that the system refuses to collapse, and it goes back to what I was telling our one of our guests here, Greg, that there's nothing wrong of taking out the swing stages and scaffolding and admitting the weaknesses we have, because the country is fundamentally healthy,
right,
and we can expose and air our discrepancies candidly without fearing to look small or little.
Yeah. The other big news that came out this week, the national debt, we are now at $26 trillion.
That's awful.
The U.S. GDP, I believe, is around 20 billion or 21 billion. It's every year. That's our gross domestic product. So we're actually looking at a situation right now where we've got more debt than we actually produce, than all the goods and services produced by America in a year.
Yeah.
Now, that in most countries would be a sign of a deeply worrying sign. We're very fortunate that we live in America, because the U.S. dollar is the reserve currency of the world. So we can get away with a lot of stuff that other countries can't, because people still want to hold dollars at the end of the day.
But it's about time we get.
But at some point we're going to need to address that. We know why this figure has gotten out of control, because 2 months ago we were told that we were going to have 2 million people dying as a result of COVID-19. Now we've got 110,000 or something.
Which is still a lot of people.
Still a lot of people, but obviously not as bad as people had originally thought. One last thing, a couple other items that caught my attention this week. Venezuela, the world's largest petroleum producer, has exactly one oil rig left producing petroleum, okay? To give you an idea of the destruction that's taken place in that oil industry, they've been unable to maintain their oil rigs. The price of petroleum has basically plummeted to a certain extent. There's no need to have so many rigs, pumping oil. but they are down basically to 2 rigs, one that's looking for natural gas and one that is still pumping oil. This from the country that has the world's largest reserves of petroleum, and that country is run by a guy named Nicolás Maduro's good friends with Opal Tometi of Black Lives Matter.
Now you know where people come from.
So, if that's what you like, if that's what you want to see for America, Venezuela, keep talking to some of these extremists because, they're all in cahoots with each other. One last thing that also caught my attention. We've got 2 million new gun owners in America since the beginning of the year. As you've seen, all this trouble, the fears of the pandemic, the rioting taking place. People have been voting with their pocketbooks very clearly.
Sure.
Buying guns and ammunition right and left. 2 million new gun owners. I think half of them are women. If we don't get a handle on the violence that's taking place on our streets sometime soon,
you don't know what's
you
going to
might
happen.
start seeing people start taking some of that into their own hands, which would be, let's be clear about this, an enormous tragedy.
Yeah.
Okay, vigilantism has no place in our society. That's yet another reason why we need to depend on police forces, on professionals, trained professionals to keep our streets safe. Okay. I'm all for the Second Amendment. People who know me, I'm a huge, advocate of the right of self-defense.
We both are.
Okay, we both are. But you know what? The job of policing belongs in the hands of the professional police department. Okay, supervised by
trained
civilians that make sure that the laws are obeyed in our community and that it's done safely and appropriately in our respective communities. But when we start talking about disbanding the police, doing away with them, we're getting into some dangerous territory.
We're going into George Zimmerman. That's what we're going into.
Yeah,
the vigilante, the voluntary, the guy who wants to shine.
Right.
That's what we're looking for.
Terrific. So listen, as we alluded to, we've got some great guests on the program for you. Our first guest, a gentleman by the name of Greg Terp. Greg is a retired major from the Miami Dade Police Department. And we've got a second guest later on, Ricardo Arria, Executive Director of Business for America. We'll be back in a second. We got a commercial break, and then we've got that terrific interview lined up with Greg Terp for you to see.
As you age, factors like health, weight, diet, and lifestyle can all impact your bones, joints, and general mobility. Over time, you might start to experience stiffness or pain due to damaged joints or connective tissue. Ultimate Glucogel by Youngevity was created to help you limit the effects of wear on your joints. It delivers a daily dose of collagen-rich gelatin your body needs for joint elasticity and maintenance. Ultimate Glucogel contains a 1-to-1 ratio of gelatin and glucosamine sulfate, which is a key building block of your bone matrix, cartilage, ligaments, tendons, and connective tissue. Gelatin's unique blend of amino acids not only help with muscle and joint health, but also has been shown to provide additional benefits for the brain, skin, and hair. Ultimate Glucogel. Natural, optimal daily support for joint health. To learn more, contact your Youngevity associate.
Good evening and welcome back to Más con Más. As promised, we've got a terrific guest for you this evening, a gentleman by the name of Greg Terp. I've known Greg for many, many years. Greg retired some time ago as a major with the Miami Dade Police Department, truly a subject matter expert on all matters related to policing, use of force. He ran the Special Patrol Bureau for many years and has a lot of experience in specialized units. Greg, welcome to the program. And I'm sorry if I butchered your introduction, but perhaps you can fill in the blanks and, whatever I missed, tell people a little bit about your background.
Thank you, first of all, and I'm glad to be here. I think you did pretty good in the introduction, but I was with Miami Dade Police for 35 and a half years, and it's a great department. They've done a lot of innovative things from my first day on the job in 1976 till today. I'm reading some really positive news in the paper that the current director is doing, Freddie Ramirez. So I'm very proud of the time served there. Saw a lot, learned a lot of great people I worked with, and we achieved a lot. So look forward to
Fantastic. And
getting
you
into
worked
some of the
patrol,
subjects.
you worked K-9, you worked a bunch of different units, correct?
I was in K-9, I was in investigations, had the auto theft task force, and then my final years, I was the bomb commander, and then I had all the specialized units my last 5 years.
Right. And as I recall, you also managed 2 Super Bowls here in Miami, right? The security for them.
I was the lead for the 2010 Super Bowl in Miami for law enforcement. And then I was called back, thankfully, last August to see if I could help again for the Super Bowl host committee as the VP of operations. And that was great. Rodney Barreto was the chair, and he was the chair back in 2010. So I was involved this time, but they had their own people running it, and they did a great job with it.
Fantastic. Well, listen, Greg, let's get started here. I mean, you and I spoke previously about what it was I wanted to sort of cover in this conversation. But first and foremost, obviously, I think you mentioned and agreed that what we saw with George Floyd was nothing less than the murder of an individual on television. But one thing that you mentioned that struck with me was that in your mind, this was a complete and total failure of leadership. And I want you to talk a little bit about that, because those comments that you made to me impressed me. I mean, obviously, this kind of behavior does not happen in police departments that are well managed.
Well, it shouldn't happen. And I think the thing about this call of police brutality was I think there was about 99% of the people, including almost everybody I know in law enforcement, in fact, everybody I know in law enforcement, repudiated it and thought it was terrible. And to sit there and watch it, it was terrible for anybody to see that. But to also see a police officer and be a professional police officer who's been there and see what this guy did, it says it's not only that he did it now, but how did he feel with all the people sitting there telling him the guy can't breathe, videotaping him, and he kept doing what he was doing. And then that's just the information I know. I don't know of the background. We found some more things out later. I think we found out later, I read that or heard one of the rookie officers, and they had 2 rookie officers there. One of the rookie officers had even said, hey, shouldn't we turn him over a couple times? And then that rookie officer at least tried to do CPR. But this guy, it was just malicious in his activities. That doesn't happen one time. To me, I hear a lot of people talking about that, policies and training. Those are all important. They need to look at them. But the number one thing I didn't see was supervision, where this guy had any supervision over him. Yeah. And the management of that supervision, I think, is very key. And we'll talk more about that. But I think I don't hear people talking about that.
Sure.
Because
so basically what he did there, he would not have done if he had not been emboldened to do that, or there was a blind eye within the department to allow it to happen.
No, I think what he's saying is vindication. I don't know if you remember the first show we did on the subject.
Right.
I said I was watching the feed taken by one of the pedestrians around there. The way he looked at the camera, when you're doing something that you know is wrong, you try to hide, you try to do something, you try to masquerade a little bit. The way he looked at the camera, it depicted to me an amount of impunity that should not be present in any police department. So the fact that somebody with his experience says now that there was a lack of leadership, I think it's personally for me vindicated. Unfortunately, I'm right in something that was so wrong. Yeah. But from day one, I saw there was impunity and lack of leadership there.
Andreas, I think you're exactly right. His look, how did he feel that what he was doing was right? He had to know what he wasn't doing. Everybody's doing the same.
He looked like he hoped that after that he would be given a medal.
Yeah, he definitely thought he could do what he was doing. And granted, I understand the other side of the street. You will hear subjects tell you a lot of things and say a lot of things to you, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on in the street that people don't understand. So you got to give police officers a little bit of leeway on something. But that one, not just a little bit of leeway, that one went so far out of bounds, it wasn't even comprehensible by most of us to see what he was doing. But I agree with you, Andres, about his impunity. Look, and that comes from a lack of somebody doing something with him.
Yeah, yeah. Now, Greg, the follow-on to the murder. Obviously, none of us have any problems with peaceful protests. I mean, that's a part and parcel of the American experience. It's part of our DNA. It's embedded in our Constitution. It's our freedom of speech. But then we saw that turn into something very ugly. I mean, sort of this descent into sort of chaos and the looting and the rioting and the burning of our cities. How would you characterize the reaction to what we saw post the Floyd murders in terms of how cities and municipalities have managed the violence that has come about as a result of the murder of George Floyd?
Well, I think you've seen from very poorly to very good and very outstanding. And it depends on a lot of factors. It depends on what were they facing, what is their background and training and experience, and what is their political statute. I mean, all those things played into it. We're seeing some areas where they want to lay back a little bit. I think the thing we're seeing with police is, for some of them, they weren't prepared for this to happen in their communities, even though we've seen it happen in a lot of communities. I think the communities that were prepared did much better, but then the leadership within the municipalities, whether it was the chiefs of police or head of the organization, I think those are important. I think one that I said, I'll tell you, you need a measured response. And a measured response doesn't mean that you're going to go in and be hard. It doesn't mean you're going to go and be soft. It means you're going to take a look at what you have and then make the decision on how you're going to handle it. The sheriff in Detroit, and I don't know if you saw that, he was out there, they were prepared. And somebody actually, when I was talking this about, said it looked like he had relationships with those people already. He ended up putting his helmet and stuff down, and they started walking with him on the protest. Now, he wasn't capitulated to join them, but they had a relationship that looked like ahead of time. And that's the biggest factor. How much are you out in the community ahead of time and you build those relationships? But since he didn't sense a violence, I don't have a problem with that. Yet on the other side, to do that like they did in Minneapolis without that same sense there wasn't going to be something else going on, you already had looting going on, that's not the proper response. But it's a tough decision to make, but you have to prepare yourself to make those. And if you're trying to do it on the fly, that's when you're going to have problems.
Right. Let me ask you something. To what extent is an abundance of force, and I don't mean physical force, I'm talking about head count. To what extent is that sort of being able to go into a situation with several hundred police officers, does that work to sort of tampen down the tendencies to riot or loot or whatever, or does it add fuel to the fire?
It can do both. And that's why I'm saying you have to understand what you're facing. One of the things that we have to worry about is people talk about the militarization of police. And I understand that. In fact, you've heard these generals talk about it recently. So if you're facing, like when we had the FTA, or if you go up to the G20, those protesters, and a lot of those include some of the same professional protesting groups like anarchists and the current one, Antifa, they include those. If you go to that one, there isn't the same emotional, there isn't the same type of feelings that was going on with this one. So you have these professional protesters out. That's a different animal that you're dealing with, and you're going to adjust your strategy to that. But in the light of the emotions and the strong right to be out and protest, something that people were definitely very emotional about and upset about, you have to be a lot more careful on how you approach those things.
Right. And
how we go in with the police officers is huge on how we deal with these things. So that's where the training, the understanding, and then also making sure that you communicate what you're asking the people to do in the protest. So again, you want to, like I said, when that sheriff communicated with those people, he saw what he had and he made his adjustment. If you're trying to communicate and you can't, and all of a sudden you're getting rocks and bottles, then you have to change that.
Sure.
But sometimes we can bring that on. So it's not an easy answer. You have to look at the circumstances surrounding it, and you have to make a decision what you're going to do. But at the end of the day, you can't allow, like we saw in Minneapolis and now we're seeing in Seattle, you can't allow them to totally take over and empower them, because then it will get worse.
Yeah. Let me ask you, you mentioned these groups, these violent groups that have shown up over the years at these protests. I think, in fact, the very first time I heard the expression Antifa was from you, Greg, many, many years ago.
The acronym.
And the acronym, I should say. And, you had told me back then, a number of years ago, that there were these extremist groups, these anarchist groups that were working a lot of these different protests, not just, within the U.S., but actually internationally. I mean, there seems to be a network. Give us a little bit of background on what you know of Antifa and these anarchist groups and how they communicate and how they move around from one city to another and get their marching orders.
Well, in police work, and we need to be as apolitical as possible. So we understand that there's domestic groups that we have to deal with, and they're from the left and from the right. And then there's just some people that have, extremist thoughts that are individuals out there. Call them lone wolves sometimes, that get emboldened by some of the rhetoric that we see go on from true terrorist groups, or these groups that are here for their agenda. And you have to learn who you are dealing with, so you understand what their end game is. And that's one of the key things. I don't think a lot of people are up to speed on what these groups are looking for, and they mix in. I do a lecture sometimes for people, and I talk to them about, if you hear about a protest group, if you come to me and say, hey, let's go save the dolphins or save the whales, I'm great about that. Let's go do it. But let's also check to see who you're getting in bed with, because you don't know what their true agenda is. And I was given that one time, and a student said from the back of the class, well, tell me about Occupy Miami. And I said, haven't heard about it. This was in September of 2011. I said, I haven't heard about it. I said, but find out who they are. Well, what I did when I went back, I was already retired, is I started checking them online, and I found out one thing. There was Occupy Miami, Occupy Wall Street, Occupy a lot of places. Well, what does that tell you right away? They're well-financed. They have all these websites. They have this communication. So this isn't some just local group spontaneously going to talk about Occupy Miami. So right away, you're dealing with an organized group. Then you want to try to look to find out, what is their agenda? Is it a social agenda? Is some sort of agenda, that's like save the planet? What is their agenda? And what you see with a lot of these groups I started looking into back when I was on the department, you see a lot that are on socialist based, and then you see some that have some other agendas. And so the Antifa and the anarchists, it's interesting when Seattle's trying to deal with them, I think they thought when they gave up the police station that it would be over in a few days and they'd go back. And I think they're finding out it's different. In fact, now we're starting to see that there's some people upset that they're hijacking the Black Lives Matter protests for their agenda, which is possibly what's happening out there. Yeah. So you have to understand who you're dealing with, who the opposition is. And if you don't know that, then you're playing into their hands.
Yeah. One last question, Greg. As I hear this sort of conversations back and forth about how systemic racism in the police departments, and we need to stop cops killing young black men. It seems to me that a lot of those conversations are misplaced, and we are asking an awful lot of our police departments on the front lines that are dealing, quite frankly, with some very unsavory individuals and groups that are having to be social workers or having to be mental health experts. What are your feelings on that? I mean, are we asking too much of our cops are we putting too many burdens on them to where it makes the essential job of keeping law and order more difficult perhaps than it should be?
That's an interesting question, and it can be looked at a few different ways. But the biggest way I'll tell you is that the reason we have police forces versus military is we're supposed to be cops, part of the community. It's community-oriented policing, and cops on patrol. So we are part of that, and we do need to understand and have the learning. Yes, we put a lot on our officers as far as the amount of training. When they talk about more training and more policies, the amount we have out there now is immense. The amount of time an officer has to spend getting certified and all the different things is immense. But that's part of what our job is. I think they've talked about 20% is criminal and 80% is social stuff. So that is what we're out there for. I think where the police officers get upset is when we don't have the strong leadership behind us and don't stand behind us. I think all of us do not approve of the negatives, the corruption when you see it, or police brutality when you see it. But I think you addressed something that the systemic part. How much is systemic today? I can tell you that I came out in 1976. The Miami Dade Police Department in this community has changed dramatically since 1976. And 1976 was better than 1960. in 1950. So we're coming a long way.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Look forward to having you again someday soon.
All right, best to both of you. Thank you.
Take care. There you go.
There you
Bye-bye.
go. He's back.
He's back. Good seeing you. Excellent. Terrific. We're going to go to a commercial break, and we'll be back in just a few minutes. Thank you again for being here on Mas con Mas on ENTV USA from the studios of Cachita Universal Studios in Miami, Florida. Thank you.
Paying attention to your overall health also means focusing on the command center of it all, your brain. Factors like stress, lack of sleep, poor diet, a sedentary lifestyle, and the bombardment of pollutants and toxins can all diminish brain and neural functions. When was the last time you concentrated on your brain health? Synaptive by Youngevity is a cutting-edge, unique brain support supplement that delivers powerful nutrients both immediately and throughout the day. Its anti-stress nutrients provide instant brain-boosting support that helps with mental focus and cognitive activity. To enhance your body's neuroprotection, Synaptive's full-spectrum antioxidant blend targets 6 major classes of free radicals that inhibit brain function. This powerful nutrient combination also promotes healthy blood flow to the brain. Synaptive, optimal antioxidant neuroprotection and support for a healthy brain. Now that's something to think about. To learn more, contact your Youngevity associate.
Welcome back to Mas con Mas. Our next guest is Ricardo Ibarria. Ricardo is the Florida director for an organization called Business for America. It is a nonpartisan, not-for-profit organization designed to increase voter participation in our electoral process. I've known Ricardo for a long period of time. We've known each other from a galaxy far, far away for quite some period of time. Very sharp guy, involved in a new and exciting venture. And Ricardo, welcome to the program. Tell our audience a little bit about what Business for America is all about, how the organization was started, what your objectives are. Give us some background.
Great. Thank you, Raul. It's great to be here, and thank you for this opportunity. Business for America was founded about 2 or 3 years ago by a lady named Bonk is her last name. She actually goes by her last name in most cases. And it is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization looking to get business involved in an area that they have not traditionally been involved in. Over the years, business increasingly has become more aware of their need to become more than just focused on profits, but also focused on the other stakeholders, their employees, their customers, the society at large, the community. That stakeholder capitalism has been growing in appreciation, and the Business Roundtable, in fact, last year, the 500 top CEOs of the nation signed a letter saying that their goals as corporations were now full stakeholder capitalism. And in that, there's been something that's also, and I'm sure your viewers are familiar with, that's been around for some time, called corporate social responsibility, that corporations and businesses need to be concerned about the broader society and not just about anything and everything just to make a profit. But there's a new subset to that space called corporate civic responsibility, and this is the origin of the unique space that Business for America is trying to occupy. Businesses have an interest in a stable economy. A stable economy is usually driven by and managed with a government that is functional and that a government that is inclusive. So Business for America tries to find ways to help businesses focus on what they can do to improve democracy. And we know, we're all very aware of the last several years, the deep polarization that exists in our society, the fact that our system, elects people that are extreme opposites and don't know how to compromise anymore. So nothing is getting done. Issues aren't getting solved. And that's not good for business. Business wants, yes.
Yeah, let me ask you a quick question, because as you're talking about corporate social responsibility, and I look back at my own sort of experience in corporate America, starting off, early on in my career, there was sort of an annual shakedown of all the employees at an organization that I worked for to contribute money to certain organizations that promoted the interests of in this case, the financial services industry. And historically, corporations have been looking out for their investors, their shareholders, and many people blame corporations for a lot of the problems that we have in America, because they're the ones that basically hire the lobbyists to lobby on their behalf, and to a certain extent skew public policy in America in a way that some people would argue ended up being in favor of the moneyed interest, the business interest in America, and not so much for the ordinary citizen. So I guess my question is, seems like you got a difficult road to hoe when you're going in front of, corporate CEOs that for many, many years have been lobbying for their, corporate interests, and now asking them, well, gee, why don't you give some time off to your employees to be able to go out and vote on election day? I mean, I'm sort of simplifying that, but you know what I'm getting at. How does that work, Rick?
Well, it's a very good point, but at the same time, all those corporations which have been lobbying generally for their self-interest are now seeing that their self-interest, which is at the core of capitalism and at the core of our businesses, is greatly impacted by having a functional democracy. So the things that are being asked of them are not political in nature. They have to do with the structure, and they have to do with, for instance, in the case that you mentioned, providing employees time to vote. A relatively simple program that allows corporations to sign up to say, we're going to provide a certain amount of either time off or no meetings on election day, or we're going to inform our employees about upcoming elections, not based on any particular political views, but just getting them engaged. That has a number of effects. There are over 100 million people in the United States that are non-party affiliated, and they are left out of many of the primaries in many cases, increasingly less so. Those people are not particularly satisfied with the political system. The ability to have employees feel good about what they're able to do, and that company is supporting that, is a very positive step. In this particular year, corporations have a great interest in the health of their employees. So there is a program that we are offering called Vote Safe. We're lobbying our senators and our congressmen to make sure that in the next bill, enough resources are put into the states to help them have a safe election during a pandemic. This is not good for Republicans or Democrats or independents. It's good for everybody. And from the corporate perspective, it keeps their employees safe. And so that's, again, another neutral area. The difference between what you raised in your question is that there's lobbying related specifically to an industry need, but this is a new space. This is about democracy itself and the structure of democracy working better. And we believe, and that it's a longer conversation, that a better working democracy in many ways, just from the very fundamentals of it, of getting more people engaged, of getting more people aware and involved in the voting process, which is the step one of a democracy, will help the corporations and the business climate in the long run and in the short run.
Rick, I have a metaphor here for, South Florida is rich in buildings, condos. Real estate is the main language here, other than English. So,
Right.
if I got you correctly, you tell me if I'm wrong. your organization, what they're trying to do is that we are in a building that reached its 10th year. So it's time to redo the roofs. So there's nothing ugly about swing stages and scaffoldings in this building as long as they do the job. Is that correct?
I think I get it. Yes, that it's something that it's good for everybody. Everybody needs that roof to be repaired. And it doesn't matter where you lie on any spectrum. We're all in that boat together. And that's similar to the country. We're in this boat together. We're very fractured today. You've all heard the term polarization on and on and on. And that is, in a way, addressed by getting more people engaged, getting more less emphasis on extremist views and more toward the center, whether it's center right, center left, or center. That will happen as more people that have been disaffected by the current system, and there are plenty of studies that show that as when that happens.
Yeah, but one of the challenges I think that we're facing, Rick, and I'd like to hear your views on this, is that to a certain extent our political system is defined as a duopoly. You know, it's basically Democrats and Republicans. We have two political parties.
Two poles.
And I know that a professor of mine from Harvard Business School, a guy by the name of Michael Porter, I'm sure you're familiar with the name.
Absolutely.
You know, he's actually, he's sort of the guru of competitive strategy as a field of study. He's applied it primarily to organizations operating in business and competitive strategies for corporate America. But he's taken a hard look at this subject in terms of, why is it that our political system seems to be so broken? And one of the arguments that he makes is that, we are in fact in a country where we have this duopoly, the two parties dominate our system, and there are structural impediments to there being other parties. I mean, that's how come you find it so difficult for independent candidates to get any traction and win certainly a presidential election, because it is so difficult because of these systemic sort of challenges that they face. You would think that in a country as big and as diverse as ours, and given all that polarization, by now we'd probably have a Green Party, we'd have a Socialist Party, we'd have a White Nationalist Party. I mean, given all the different extremes that we have, but instead we've got two parties. That's it, Democrat and Republicans. You want to tackle that, Rick? Is that part of what you guys are looking to do in terms of open up that structure?
Well, it is one of the initiatives that Business for America supports, which is to have open primaries in as many states as possible. And in Florida, that's going to be on the ballot this year. That the open primaries will start to take away that power of the parties, where in the primary process, usually the most extremist views are the ones that prevail. Correct. And so you are able to, when you have, it's going to be the top, there are different approaches to it, but the top two candidates in the primary are the ones that wind up going to the final election, the general election. That results in people being able to, politicians and candidates having to appeal to a broader set of people, not just the extremes. So that is something that will help in the process. And
Rick, there's a lot of vested interest there, brother.
Yeah.
A lot of vested interest.
Absolutely, but that's why this is one of those things that has to come to the people. Terrific. And that's why it's now going to be, we're fortunate, and there was a group of Republicans and Democrats together in the state of Florida that got this on the ballot. All Florida votes I believe is the group, and they are, from Mike Fernandez, who is a Republican, to Doc Solomon, who's been a Democratic candidate repeatedly, and many folks in between. They see that if the people then put this in place, things will start to change. I mean, all of these issues have to be dealt with methodically over time and by a lot of different constituents. But many groups, including ours, are going in that direction. This is one of those things that will help.
Okay. So, in other words, there's nothing wrong with cap holdings and swing stages, because what happens in corporate America and in America in general is that sometimes we are reluctant to show that we have weaknesses and that we're working on them. I don't know if you agree with me on that.
Weaknesses?
Weaknesses. And then for some Americans to acknowledge that there are some weaknesses, that the corporate world has to work on several issues. It's like admitting an Achilles heel, or that admitting that and it's shameful for some. Whereas in an open discussion, in a candid conversation, any developed country should be proud to air their differences and their weaknesses in public.
Absolutely, and that is at the core there almost of the individual one-on-one
Exactly.
Aspect that we have lost, the ability to talk to each other, the ability to talk to each other, and I put it in terms of we have moved to debating everything instead of having dialogue about it. And dialogue is a completely different construct. It's more about understanding the person you are speaking to, and you take that from a micro level across to the parties and everything else. We need to be for instance, Democrats believe that in November, if there's a change, that that'll solve everything. It won't solve everything. What we need is a long-term strategy to improve the quality of our government, and one of those is getting voters to vote. We have one of the lowest voter turnouts in general elections of all the developed countries, and that in itself is a metric that we can seek to improve year after year through the different initiatives that can be put in place.
Yeah. Listen, I think a lot of that polarization, I think we've talked about this before, Andres, is being driven by the media, right? I mean, to a certain extent.
Of course.
You've got your Fox News on one end, you've got your MSNBC on the other. Each one of those has their own particular audience. They each have their own talking points.
To the extremes.
They cater to the extremes, because they know that, exactly who that MSNBC audience viewer is
what they want to
and
hear.
what they want to hear.
Yeah.
So, of course, the conversation that you hear is completely different than the conversation that's being told, or the quote unquote facts that are being told to the folks on the other end. And you're right. I mean, there's very little conversation. There's very little sort of trying to find the middle ground in America. I think it's absolutely one of the most critical problems facing this country. And, we need to do better. We really need to sit down and be able to have these very difficult discussions, whether it's about race or economic inequality, or about the abortion, the environment, a bunch of different things here that are really sort of become hot button items, and we need to find what we agree on, and see if even within those sort of extreme issues we can find some sort of a common ground, to where we can move this country forward, man. Because so long as we are both sort of stuck in our respective trenches, just kind of sniping at each other,
nothing's going to happen.
Nothing's going to happen. So, Rick, thank you for being on the program. You want to mention again the name of your organization and how folks can reach out to you if they're interested in contacting you?
Absolutely, sure. The name of the organization is Business for America. The website is bfa.us, and my email, and I'd love to hear from many of your viewers, is ricardo@bfs.us.
Okay, terrific.
Thank you.
Ricardo at BFA, correct? BFA?
At bfa.us.
All right, Ricardo at BFA.com, and it's Business for America, BFA.com. I'm sorry, BFA.us. BFA.us. Correct. Sorry about that. BFA.us.
It's a habit. It's a
Terrific.
habit.
It's a habit, man. Everybody get in the .com era. BFA.us, Business for America, Ricardo Arria. Thank you, Ricardo, for being on the program. Appreciate you being with us here this evening. And we're now...
Go.
We got to go.
Yeah, we got to go. We got to go.
Talk to you soon.
Cardio Beats from Youngevity supports a healthy cardiovascular system and helps supply the nutrients your body needs to support better physical endurance. Your capacity to last a little longer is largely based on how well your cardiovascular system expends oxygen and circulates blood through your body. Cardio Beats helps combat the oxidative stress caused by physical activity by supplying you with key nutrients that support your cardiovascular system. These nutrients have also been shown to help improve endurance. Cardio Beats starts with organic beets, a rich source of nitrates to support healthy blood flow and oxygen transport. We've added whole foods from highly bioavailable seaweed and mango fruit, both known for blood flow support, and antioxidant-rich sweet cherries. Then, for even more heart health benefits, we finished it off with key amino acids. Take your physical endurance to the next level with Cardio Beats. Talk to your Youngevity associate for more information.
Welcome back to Moscow Mas from the studios of Cachita Universal Studios and ENTV USA. Thank you for staying with us. Appreciate that participation. Andres Albuquerque here with me. That interview with Ricardo Barria was pretty interesting.
It was great. I mean, it's like I said, we shouldn't be ashamed of airing our problems. We shouldn't be ashamed of discussing our weaknesses. It's all for the best. And we have to avoid being reluctant. And like you mentioned, corporate America for so long was just minding their own business. It's about time they take a broader look. And actually, to be fair, during the pandemic, for whatever the reasons, pandering, demagoguery, I don't care what the objective was. The truth is that the private sector made a step forward, and most of them have been very, very helpful with the American populace at large in general.
Listen, I'm still getting used to it because I grew up in a world where corporations focused on one thing and one thing only, and that was the interests of their individual shareholders.
Which is good. Which is good.
It still should be the primary focus.
Sure.
Okay, because the only reason the capitalist system works
is because it's
we
profit.
Make money.
Because it's profit. If we don't make money, who's going to eat here?
And because you have investors who put their capital on the line to make things successful.
Take their chances.
Take their chances. So you know what? I think we all have a responsibility to be a good citizen, whether you're an individual or a corporation.
Sure.
This effort to sort of pay attention to things that have been ignored, for way too long, whether it's racial equality, whether it's, the environment, a host of different things that we can point to and say, hey, we need to focus on these problems. But one of those things that we touched upon with Rick was that whole system that we have here in America. We basically have two political parties, a Republican or a Democrat. If you don't fit into one of those two buckets, or if you don't vote,
you don't have a voice.
One of those two candidates,
you don't have a voice.
You really don't have a voice in America. And it's a little bit, what Rick alluded to. The primary contests are controlled by and large in most states by those two parties, and so you're going to have a choice of basically two candidates. I mean, look at the whole discussion that we've been having for these last couple of weeks. Okay,
yeah.
Do you want Joe Biden or do you want Donald Trump?
I mean,
right? And there are a lot of people that, quite frankly.
So do we really deserve this?
Yeah, I mean,
do we deserve to choose between one and the other? They
don't necessarily want to have that sort of,
Sure. There should be middle ground.
Two choices, Sure. I mean, they want to have another opportunity to vote for somebody else, but unfortunately, there are systemic reasons why that's happened over in America. It's not in the Constitution. There's nothing in the Constitution that says we're going to have two political parties and only two political parties. But we need to have those conversations if we're genuine.
There's so many conversations we need to have
about moving the ball forward. One last thing I wanted to talk about, sort of on a pleasant subject, if you will. This coming weekend, now on June 14th, is the 245th birthday, if you will, of the United States Army.
Happy birthday, Army.
1775. The Continental Army, the Continental Congress established our first Army. George Washington was appointed as its head, and there began the great tradition of the United States Army in American history. We've got to be grateful for all the veterans that have served our nation in the Army over the past 245 years. We're not putting down the other services. Marine Corps, Air Force, Navy, Coast Guard, nothing wrong with those folks, but this weekend happens to be the Army's birthday. And we want to have a shout out to all those veterans and those people who are in uniform serving in the big green machine, as they call it. Happy birthday to all of you. Thank you for keeping us safe, and look forward to having you again next week on another program here at Moscow Mas with my guest, Andres Albuquerque. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for sponsoring our programs to Longevity, to Grimal Joyeria,
Cafe
Cachita,
and the
to
Brazilian
Porto Alegre
restaurant.
Brazilian restaurant.
I'm going there.
Exactly. To our sponsors, very grateful for your support. Thank you very much for being with us. Look forward to seeing you again sometime soon.
Have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.